Hello everyone, welcome to Rola Diplomacia episode, as stands Roll for Diplomacy episode. We are Roll Initiative, Roll for Initiative, which stands in Portuguese to Roll Initiative. My name is André Tavares and I am the host of the show. And at the other side of the table, we have our beautiful and honorable guest, Adam Koebel.
Hi, hello. That's me.
How are you, man?
I'm doing great. I'm doing very well. I just got back from Seattle and I'm getting ready to go to Japan. And I have a very busy week ahead of me, and this is the beginning of it. So I've just got like lots of fun stuff to do. I have tons of role playing to do. But this is nice. I don't get to like just sit down and relax and like talk about RPGs very often. I'm so busy doing them. So it's nice to take a little break. So I appreciate it. It's a good start for my week. Thank you.
Awesome. And we appreciate you having you here. But before we start the show, we have to talk about our beautiful sponsor. As all the Portuguese speakers and players and community already knows, our sponsor shop is Voodoo Plays. You can find Voodoo Plays at voodooplays.com, where you can find your favorite RPG, board game, and accessories. You have there in that shop a lot of indie role-playing game. You have traditional stuff also. Everything that is out of stock, you can contact them and they get as soon as possible for you. And also, if you don't find the role-playing game you're searching, you can email them, contact them, that they will help you find in other shops which where to find in the cheapest way. So yeah, they are crazy. They help you to find games in other shops. So make sure to visit Voodoo Plays. They are awesome. They are English website, but they are Portuguese from the north, from Porto, and yeah, that's all. Regarding our beautiful patron, we have a very humble and small patron with beautiful 18 patrons, and thank you so much. We are at this very moment trying to defeat our next goal, which stands to the bugbear. So we have this gamification thing in our patent, Adram, which our objectives are monsters, you know. Obviously Dungeons and Dragons monsters, and you understand why. So as we kill the monsters, as we beat them, we unlock things for the patrons. At this moment we are trying to get one RPG to give away per month. And how can you help? You can help by making your attacks, your powerful attacks, your spells, and so on. You have a small amount of attacks and spells you can do that gives you access. And I know, guys, that everything is in Portuguese because we have like this very this motto that we are trying to actively show that to the Portuguese population that RPG exists. But somewhere in the future, probably things will start to translate some things to English. And yeah, we also have a YouTube channel where you can check our videos, where you can even check our Roll Lisboa video, which is an event focused on RPGs that we, Roll Initiative, created last December on 27. So now this is the part where we start to show.
Yeah, let's do it.
Beautiful.
Hello.
Hello, Adam. This very first question, I think it's like perfect for you because probably there's only one person who can correctly answer that. So who is Adam Koebel and what does he do?
That's a deeply existential question. I get asked that a lot, like, who are you? And I'm like, oh boy, I don't know. I've spent 35 years trying to figure that out, and I don't know, and I will never know. But I can tell you things that I do, and we could create an idea of what maybe that might mean. I'm Adam Koebel. I'm a full-time role-playing game broadcaster on Twitch. I'm the GM for RollPlay and for Roll20.net. That's where I do my two main shows. And yeah, I play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons on the internet. A lot of folks know me from being the co-designer of a little indie tabletop role-playing game called Dungeon World. I've done a few other, yeah, that one. That's the one.
This one.
I've done a few other designs, mostly just kind of like Kickstarter stuff, you know, stretch goals for friends. I did a dungeon for Lampblack and Brimstone. I did a little bit of work for White Wolf years ago. And I'm working on a new design right now called Womb of Night, which is a psychedelic sci-fi game. But mostly I think people run across me on Twitch or on Twitter or on YouTube doing RPG streaming stuff.
Awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
Although I don't see a Womb of Night video for a long time, Adam.
Yeah, well, so right now, Womb is in the hands of John Harper, who is designing the character sheets for it right now. So,
No way.
so it's in John's hands right now. He's doing the graphic design for me, and then once that's done, we'll have our first kind of alpha play test set, and then I'm going to put that out into the world. And while people are messing with that, I'll probably do another stream to fill out the rest of the playbooks. But yeah, if you're interested in Womb of Night at all, it's a Blades in the Dark hack. So I guess it's a Forged in the Dark game, and it is about a lot of weird things, but mostly it's inspired by like Mobius and Jodorowsky and Dune and other sort of late 60s, early 70s psychedelic sci-fi, and then also heavy metal, both the magazine and the movie and the music genre. And yeah, and I've done some development of it. If you want to go and check it out, it's on my YouTube channel or on my Twitch VODs.
It's crazy. It's
yeah,
crazy
it's a very it's I'm trying to make my sophomore design effort like really weird, because we went fairly mainstream in terms of Dungeon World. Like it's a game in which you play fantasy adventurers, you know, fighting monsters and getting treasure. And so now I want to make a game where the people that get it and the people that are into it are really into it and really get and appreciate it. And I want everyone else to be like, what is this?
Yeah.
Get it away from me. I'm not interested. I want it to be very polarizing, which is fun. And you can do that, I think, when it's your second game, right? If that's your first game, you'll just forever be like the weird guy who made this strange game.
Yeah.
But as my second game, I can be like, here is my mainstream commercial success, and then here's the weird strange game that nobody wants to play, and I can be fine with that because I've already had some success with Dungeon World. So.
That's beautiful. No, Mariano, which is like a great fan also, and he is one Dune and Jodorowsky fan too. He asked us now. Ask Adam, how could you invite John Harper to the show? It would be really cool.
Yeah, I mean, John he does interviews. I can get you in touch with him.
That's awesome.
No one can control John Harper, but I can certainly point you at him. But you can't have him until he's done doing these character sheets for me. then I will. Once I have them, I'll introduce you.
No, that's awesome. Knowing that Womb of Night character sheets are being made by the very own designer of the hack, the original version.
Yeah, well, awesome. I mean, the Womb is being designed as part of, like, everybody who backed the Blades in the Dark Kickstarter is going to get a copy of Womb in PDF. Because it's awesome. It's part of the original Kickstarter. So John and the folks at Evil Hat, they're all working very closely with me to get it like published and to put it out into the world. But as far as the design, just go over there to your weird corner of the internet and talk about pterodactyl wizards, and then when you're done, you give it to us and we'll make it look nice. And we'll put it out there.
People are saying he is a force that cannot be caged, John Harper.
I think that's reasonable.
Beautiful, man. Coming back to you and to what do you do? Why are you a variety streaming? Knowing that today there are focused streamers, like they really tend to focus on one type of content or genre or game, even games today. So why are you a variety streamer?
So I mean, for me, it's interesting because the streaming part, the like playing, what people normally think of as like Twitch streaming, playing Apex or playing Fortnite or whatever people are playing. For me, that's like very much a side job. Like I love playing games and I love talking about them. I love game design in all forms. I'm sort of infamous for my taking forever to discuss the title screen of a game.
Yeah, but it's awesome, man.
Yeah, it's an extension. It's an extension for me of my love of game design rather than wanting to be a professional video game player. So it's a side job, and for me, it's a nice way to sort of like take a moment to relax, because most of my content is either live role-playing games or prep or discussion of role-playing games, right? So on my own channel, most of my videos are going to be office hours or GM prep or first looks at RPGs, but occasionally I do have time to play a video game, and even then it's through kind of hanging out, playing the game, and then just like discussing kind of what's going on in the game and kind of helping me understand those disciplines better. So yeah, it's less that I would consider myself like a variety streamer, and more just that I occasionally have time to stream stuff that isn't role playing games. I definitely like have a niche, but I think it behooves everybody to play a bunch of different games. Like even if you don't consider yourself someone who likes first-person shooters, or maybe you consider yourself an RTS fan exclusively. It's worth playing board games, or it's worth trying role-playing games. Or if you just play role-playing games, try playing a card game sometime, because I think that every game that we play enriches our understanding of game design generally and makes us better at playing games and understanding them, regardless of what game they might be.
Yeah, and what you just said, it also like a very nice metaphor. Or don't just play one role-playing game. Try other games, guys. There's a lot of there's a very big spectrum, and if you are in your bubble, try to reach out to see more designs and different experiences, right?
Yeah, I think that there's something to be said for, and this is definitely something that has happened to me more as I've kind of gotten more experience and gotten older, is that I find that I'm interested less in doing everything and becoming more and more interested in doing a few things really well. But I also think that you can get into this place. It's like having taste in music or food or art, right? If you grow up only listening to the radio or only going to the restaurants that are within a block of your house, you can love and appreciate those things. You can love the music that's played on the radio. You can love those restaurants within a block of your house, and you can understand them and have a deep and abiding affection for them. But you'll never know how good the food is a city over or in another country, or you'll never know how good the wide variety of music that's available unless you actively go out of your way to try and enjoy it. But you may find that you come back to that stuff that you loved in the first place, right? Like I will always have a soft spot for Dungeons and Dragons, because that's how I learned to play role-playing games. That's where I started. But I think that it's important to at least try other things. It doesn't mean that you have to always play different things. It doesn't mean you should abandon the games that you love just because you've played them before. But I definitely think that there's a process, right, to learning why you like a game and understanding how games work generally that will make you develop your palate. You'll learn to love all of the games, old or new, better the more you play, whether you like them or not. Right? Playing bad games can be a really positive experience because you can understand why you don't like them or why you feel like they're bad.
Yeah, and I have like this very, you probably will be angry with me. Yeah. You talk about food, and then I remember that you really love ramen.
I do very much.
I never tasted ramen. How does it? How does it taste?
It's so good. It's like, so I'm not a big soup guy generally, but ramen is my favorite food because the regional variants within like the one type of food are pretty wild. Like a ramen from one end of Japan is going to be very different from a ramen from the other, and there are seasonal variations, and it's just this like getting to understand a very specific thing and then learning the nuance within it that I really like. So yeah, I actually only developed, and this is I guess a good analogy for playing games or for enjoying any kind of artistic thing. I only really developed this sort of taste for ramen when the ramen place that I usually go in Vancouver burned down. There was a fire, and they had to close. They had to close for like a year, and it was my favorite place. And I never went anywhere else. And I saw it, and we went there to go there, and there was a fire, and I was like, damn it, this is my favorite ramen place. Where am I going to get ramen now? So, my friend Emily, she and I went to every other ramen place, one after another, every time we wanted to get ramen. And over the course of a year, I had tried pretty much every Japanese noodle joint in Vancouver, and I have this much better appreciation for the different stuff. And I still go back now that it's reopened. I still go back to that OG ramen place, but I understand why I like it better. Right? It's
that's awesome.
You can learn role-playing games from 5th edition D&D, and you can play it for years. And then you can play Apocalypse World and Burning Wheel and Fiasco and Microscope and Monster Hearts, and you can try all of these other games. But you can find yourself coming home to Dungeons and Dragons, but you're going to know why you like it better. You're not going to just say, I play D&D because it's whatever's in front of me. You're going to say, I play D&D because of these game design aspects.
Yeah, that's true. Awesome. That's really awesome. Somehow I find myself in that aspect that you just described. But Adam, probably you play more often online, right? And we had
Yes, absolutely.
a community question that today, do you prefer playing online or face to face?
So my experience with playing online prior to starting up with Roll20 and starting up with RollPlay, prior to 4 or 5 years ago, was nil. Like, I never played role-playing games online. I would play sometimes with PDFs on my iPad in person, especially going to cons, right? Instead of bringing my whole library, I could bring my iPad. But that was about it. Like, it was still in person, rolling dice with my friends or with strangers at conventions and everything. And it has almost completely flipped now. 99% of the time I'm playing online. I think even off stream, I can't remember the last time that I played a role-playing game in person. It would have been 2014. Because now, if I'm playing in person, it's usually a role-play, like a live show, right?
Yeah.
It's one of our kind of like every couple of months live shows that we do for roleplay. So I've sort of like moved away. When I go to conventions, I find that it's essentially I'm doing something else, right? I'm not on vacation because I'm still working and meeting fans and doing panels, but I just don't feel the need to play more role-playing games. And honestly, I would miss having chat. I would miss having people telling me that they're enjoying what I'm doing. I would miss the feedback. I would miss, not having that. I wouldn't have a Q&A thread afterwards for people to be like, this character was really cool, or why did you do this thing in the game? I really like and have come to really enjoy and embrace that feedback now, and I feel like I would miss that. Though I did fairly recently, I did teach some role-playing game courses at UCLA, and that wasn't streamed. It was just like in person with some students, some RPG students, and it was really nice. It was a fun little game, but it was with people who were there to pick apart role-playing games, and so we still got that post-game kind of, let's spend 20 minutes to talk about what happened and to discuss it as a group. And I think if I were to play a game, off stream, in person, I would need that. I would need to schedule time to sit with the players after and just say like, oh, what did we think of these games? Did we enjoy it? What do we like about these mechanics? And to have that as part of the group experience, because otherwise I feel like I would miss it too much.
Now the first part is like, do you think that somehow the developing industry of role-playing games do we'll soon see like streaming mechanics for streaming games? Do you understand what I'm trying to reach?
No,
like,
absolutely. Yeah, so I think the analogy here is convention.
Oh, sorry, continue.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, I think that like you've seen games develop convention rules, whether they're part of the game or whether the game itself, its design is informed by quick play or one-shot play. We've seen these kinds of things happen, and I absolutely think, like, if you look at Roll20 is financing the development of a game called Burn Bright, which is designed, at least in part, to be played
with Jim McClure,
in
right?
Roll20. Yeah, so that's a game that is being designed with that in mind. I think a lot of game designers are running streams, and GMs are creating things to change the way the game plays because they know it is being perceived by an audience. Right, the Far Verona faction turn is part of that design. Shows that do sort of like random encounters for donations, like whatever you think of these things, they are ways that people are hacking their game to change for live play. And I definitely think that there will be in the future more of that, like game play for an audience. You know, we all kind of have to follow to some degree or another in the wake of bigger game developers, and I think that game devs, speaking like from my personal experience with other game developers, and as one, there's a lot of pushback. Like there's a lot of like, this is just a flash in the pan. People don't care about this stuff. They won't for very long. People will buy in maybe now everybody likes Critical Role, but in 3 or 4 years, nobody will, which I think is total horseshit. Like that's not at all true. People who are designers can get caught up in things being the way we think that they are. And I think that they'll change. I think that will absolutely change. And I think that we'll see a D&D supplement or some kind of mention of if you are playing this for an audience. And God knows I would love to see that, because D&D sucks for an audience. I agree. You have to do so much work to make a D&D fun. Yeah. I would love it if the people at Wizards of the Coast would like do that work for me, because I'm already paying them for these books. So like that would be great. I would pay for a supplement like that. And whether it comes from Wizards directly or it comes from like an enterprising DMs guild thing, there will be something that'll say like, here are the rules that make D&D boring to watch. Here's how you can change them. Here is some new stuff you can add to make D&D more fun, and some common hurdles that you can use these rules to get over. So yeah, absolutely. I think that design exists, game design especially, exists to solve problems. And often that problem is the game doesn't work the way I want it to, or this game does not exist and I want that game to exist. And I think that someone will get off their butt and they will design something to solve the problem that all of us, Matt Colville, myself, Matt Mercer, Rivals, Waterdeep, et cetera, the hundreds and hundreds of people who are trying to run successful shows using D&D, someone will solve that problem for us, or they will try, at least.
Yeah, but it's like, it's almost as the game is yelling to the developers. They need this. Like, there's so many. I don't know even how many games are at this moment being played, Dungeons and Dragons or other role-playing games at Twitch. So it's like, it's really they are yelling at us. The games are yelling that this type of mechanics are needed. And
I think if you look at any conversation between any group of experienced online dungeon masters, right? If you sit these people down and you say like, what about role-playing D&D online for an audience is challenging for you? We all kind of have the same answer. We all talk about the same stuff, which means this isn't a dungeon master problem. This isn't a group problem. This is a game problem. Yeah, and we all have our own solutions for those games, right?
Awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. No, Adam, as we already know, you have like a lot of shows. You are a photographer. You have Hot for Teacher. You have office hours. You have your campaigns, your games, conventions, traveling and stuff, and life. Hopefully, right?
Hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully, how do you manage everything?
That's a great question. I think the thing is like, for me, learning to say no to things is super important. Like when you're first getting started, there is this impression. I think a lot of people live with this throughout their whole career as a content creator. There's this idea that if you slow down, if you stop, if you say no to any project, you are failing, right? Because that might be the one that is a big deal for you. That might be the thing that turns you into a superstar. And like, I'm happy and comfortable with the things that I'm doing. I would rather, like I was saying earlier, I'd rather do a few things really well than try to do everything. And so when I choose to do something, whether it's take on a stream, whether it's do a new RPG, whether it's sit down and have a conversation about role-playing games with a podcast, I do it on purpose. I choose everything that I do because I think that it is going to be good for me, whether it's going to be business good or just fun. Learning to say no to the things that I'm like, I just don't have time to make space for this, I think is really, really important. And just doing the stuff, chasing the things that give me energy, that I feel like passionate about. And as soon as a show starts to feel like it's dragging or it's not fun anymore, I will find a way to either stop doing that thing or change the thing so that it becomes something that I want to do. And I've gotten pretty good. And I guess this is the real advice, right? Is get good at knowing what is just like general tiredness and what is like actual burnout when something stops providing, because you can play a game, and this goes for people who are just playing role-playing games with their friends. You can have a bad session, right? You can have some,
it happens.
yeah, you can go into a session and say like, oh, I just don't want to run this today, I don't want to play, I don't want to do this doesn't sound fun to me. But it doesn't have to mean that the thing is done, just something needs to change, right? And recognizing what's internal and what's external, and kind of knowing yourself and what's good for you. That's how I know when to say yes or no to something, and being able to do that confidently without worrying that I'm missing out or whatever, you know.
That's awesome.
And that, I think that's the thing, right? That's what keeps me going.
Yeah, guys, you know, learn to say no, guys. There are some crazy guys out there that I know that don't know how to say no, and then they try to do everything, and it's a burnout.
Well, and I think it's more than like just burnout too. Like saying yes to everything means that you have there's no quality control.
Yeah.
Right. You will just literally you'll do anything. So everything you do, you have no control over whether it's going to be worth doing. And so this way, if you're able to turn down opportunities, you can do so for a good reason. And it means that when you say no enough, the yes matters. Yes means something instead of just saying yes to everything.
Well, thank you for saying yes to this conversation, man.
Oh, and that's the thing. Like, you make these decisions, and you do the thing, and you learn from it, and then you know better next time whether to say yes or no. So, yeah, like it's practice, right? Just like anything else, like managing time and being as busy as I am and being as scheduled. Like, I've learned to do that. I'm better at it now than I was 3 years ago.
Awesome. That's really awesome. Now, knowing yourself and let's try to make a bridge. You currently are playing a lot of RPGs or campaigns.
Yeah.
Which one? Can you tell us which one you currently enjoy most and why?
Yeah. So it's funny because you say like you're playing a lot of RPGs. I mean, I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm playing Stars Without Number. Like I have 3 right now. I'm playing more 5th edition D&D than any other time. I'm running 3 different 5e shows. Right, I have the Ravnica show. Right, I have Jace Bellerin and Mastai, which is my sort of newest show. I have Roll20 Presents Mad Mage, which we just started as a continuation of Dragon Heist. I have Court of Swords, which is on episode 106 or 107 now. And then we have Far Verona, right, which is a huge investment in terms of the kind of off-stream stuff.
Indeed.
So I think that in terms of favorite, it's right now. I think the way that I indicate like how I feel about a show, how much I want to do it, or which ones I'm having the most fun with, is what show am I the most excited about the morning I wake up and it's the day of that show, right? If I get up in the morning and I think, oh, I have this show, how do I feel about that? The one that I'm the most excited about right now is Court of Swords, because despite being 100+ episodes in, I think we're in a really good place. The players are all very comfortable working together. We're all very excited about what's currently going on in the campaign. And I think that from a moment to moment, like day-to-day thing, that's the show I'm the most excited about. But I think that every campaign has something that is uniquely exciting about it, right? Whether it's playing with new players, whether it's about an incredibly dedicated fan base, whether it's about trying something new with a group that I'm familiar with. Like, every show has something to be excited about. And I think that right now, the thing that I'm the most excited about when I get up in the morning and I'm like, all right, what do I got to do today? If it's a Court of Swords day, that's a good day. You know,
That's
I'm the most excited about that. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome.
But it absolutely changes. It shifts, right? Like there was definitely a point. There was definitely a point where I was not feeling that about Court of Swords, where I was kind of like, you know, this game just isn't really doing it for me right now. Like, I'm feeling frustrated by it. I feel like it's kind of not going anywhere. The players feel like they're stuck in one place. And this goes to show, this is kind of learning that nuance, because if I didn't know better, I might have said, like, you know, maybe we should stop. Maybe we should stop Court of Swords, right? But I knew that we would be able to push through it. I could recognize what was kind of dragging me down about it, and we could fix that, and we could make changes, right? And we did, and so we were able to fix that and make it back into something that now is my favorite. Yeah.
Yeah, that comes from what you said early, like knowing what is burnout or just fatigue, and work it out as a group, which is important. That's awesome, and we are glad that you guys work it out so we can have a show to watch, a beautiful show to watch. And also, for everyone who does not know, I think I already shared, but I will share again. There's a Patreon, of course, of RollPlay, so check that out, guys. I will share with the community. Mods, can you share the link, please? There's a beautiful Patreon of RollPlay where you can see access to its Q&As and some maps too, depend on the tier, right?
Yeah, so for the Patreon, for the Patreon for RollPlay, we get a bunch of different stuff. Like, I do a monthly GM lecture series that we just started. We have a zine that's in the sort of 30s for issues now. Every episode of every show, we do like a post show, and then everybody that's part of the Patreon gets access to the Discord server and can join a faction and be part of the Farverona universe. And we've been running that about 3 years now, and basically it pays for live shows and to pay the cast, right? So we fly people out to do live shows at the studio in St. Louis, and it's been really fun. It's been super cool being able to engage as deeply with the fans as we have, especially with Farverona.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful project, and it gives us our smaller communities and groups or producers, and it serves as an inspiration. So thank you guys.
Yeah.
So as you, how long do you play RollPlay, Adam?
Like, how long have I been role-playing, at all ever?
Yeah, at all ever.
26 years, 25 years?
It's a long time. It's almost my age, man.
Yeah, most of my life. I started playing when I was like 10 or 11. And I've been playing on and off, mostly on. Since
I bet this is really hard to answer, or maybe not. For some people it is. From all RPGs you already played, which one is your favorite and why?
You know, I think you'd think that this would be hard to answer, but I mean, I feel like everybody already knows what my favorite role-playing game is. I feel like I talk about it enough that people mostly will just be able to pick this up. If I have to pick, it's Burning Wheel. It is a game that even after, because I started playing Burning Wheel 2004, so 15 years ago. And I have been playing it kind of on and off since then. I've done 3 different shows of Burning Wheel. I talk about it all the time. And I think that it's a game that I both feel like I have a mastery and understanding of that is long fought. Like, I earned my way into understanding that game, and I think that I can make it do things that no other role-playing game can do. I've inveterately stolen bits and pieces of it for other games. I think it does things that no other RPG does, and it's one of those things that it's certainly not for everybody, but for me, it's if I could only ever play one role-playing game again, that'd be the one, for sure.
It's beautiful. Yeah, I did not play already Burning Wheel, but I played Mouseguard, which somehow is similar, right? It's like it's child. But yeah, we have here a lot of people in Portugal that already played Mouseguard. And talking about Mouseguard, now I will be building a very beautiful bridge. We are at this very moment having a giveaway. Where is he? Oh, I don't know where's my copy. Well, Doesn't matter. We are
There's a copy around here somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere. At this moment, we are having a giveaway. We are giving away the Mouse Guard role-playing game soft cover. All you have to do, guys, is go into our Discord channel, and there's a text channel which stands for giveaway, but it's in Portuguese. It's sorteio. And if you type a phrase with Rola Iniciativa and Mouse Guard, you will be able to win that giveaway. So you have until 26th of March to participate, and at the last Sunday, which stands to 31. Last Sunday of March will be at Rola Diplomacia, at another episode. We'll be making the live giveaway, so don't miss out. Make sure to get your Mouse Guard role-playing game soft cover now.
Yeah, Mouse Guard is such a fantastic game. It's very cool. I think that it manages to stay true to being a Burning Wheel game, right? Because it's inspired by Burning Wheel and shares a lot of mechanics with it, but really captures the spirit of the comics well. It's very, very hard to make a game that is licensed or based on something else. I think it's an absolutely difficult challenge. But Mouse Guard, I think, does a good job, and it's deceptively gritty. It's one of these games where you look at it, and I know a lot of people have seen it. They're not familiar with the comics, and they say, "Oh, it's a game about being a mouse." Like, I'm not. It's too cute for me. I'm not interested in that. But it's very, very different than what you expect, and I think it's a super cool game. I personally like Torchbearer better because that's more my thing. That gritty dungeon crawl thing. But they share enough mechanically that I think it's really cool that you can play one and learn the other and kind of compare and contrast. They both do different things with a similar tool set.
That's awesome. Adam, did you already play the Under the Yellow Hills from Vincent?
No.
No.
I have not played.
You
it.
must.
No. Is it good?
You must play it, man. It's not good. It's awesome. It's Vincent. Come on. It's Vincent and
Listen,
Miguel.
you know what? I say this as someone who I love Vincent Baker, and he knows that no game designer's entire body of work is perfect, right? Like Vincent, there's a bunch of stuff that I think Vincent even would say, like, yes, this game exists, and yes, people can play it, but I kind of wish they would stop. Because it's not, you can't, this is the thing about making a game. Once you put it out into the world, and I guess photography is like this too. There's a saying in photography that your first 10,000 photographs are your worst. You will always hate the first 10,000 photos that you make and produce. And I think that that's true of game design too. You will make games and you will look back at them and be like, why did I let people play that? Why is that out in the world? And so I think it's important to look at designers' work individually as designs, and certainly we can draw threads between them, but to be able to say, like, this game is great because it was made by this designer, it can lead us to some weird places, because I certainly know people who have made games and then made other games and been like, wow, these are very, very different, and one of these is really good, and one of these I don't think is as good. So it's an interesting thing, but I definitely think that, like, it's worth knowing a body of work rather than saying, like, these are all Vincent Baker games, so they must all be good. But, like, looking at them all and reading them and playing them all will give you an idea of why Vincent is a good designer and what things about those games are good. And I think that's a very good way of kind of looking at design.
Yeah, I think even Vincent dismissed the in the chat they are saying Vincent explicitly took Dogs in the Vineyard out of the shelves. Yeah, because he saw that it was not like the game for him.
Yeah, and that sort of triggered a lot of interesting discourse about, like, who controls a game. Like, if you know, like with Dungeon World, I can't do that with Dungeon World because the text is Creative Commons, and even if we stopped selling it, even if we burned all the copies of Dungeon World, even if we took the PDF down from every store, the text is still doesn't belong to us exclusively, right? People have built other games built on it. There are websites that use the text. We could not retract it from the world. But in models like with dogs, Vincent can kind of do that. There's no legitimate way to purchase dogs in the vineyard right now. And I think that it, at the very, very least, it's an interesting conversation around who controls art. Like if Leonardo da Vinci were to come back from the dead and go up to the Mona Lisa and light it on fire, would they be allowed, right? Does the Mona Lisa belong to Leonardo da Vinci's reanimated corpse or not? Does it belong to the world now, right? Do the people that make a thing control the thing, right?
Until which point?
Right, exactly. And there's a lot of like nested weirdness here around like copyright and around public domain and that sort of thing, and like how that works. And I mean, you see this with Dune and with Lord of the Rings, where the children of the people who made it, they're like, well, this is ours. And it's like, well, you didn't make that thing. So yeah, I don't know. I'm torn on that. I think that it's really cool as a designer to put something out in the world and see people love it. But if you don't love it anymore, I think all you can really do is say, this is a thing that I made and I'm not interested in it anymore. And I think these are the things that are bad about it. And I don't like it. I don't want it to exist. But I don't think that you have the control to retract it. You can't bring something back from the world once you've given it.
That's true.
Which is, it's something that's scary about being an artist, right? I think that you have to acknowledge that in some small way, showing a thing, right, giving it public space, whether people are buying it or just absorbing it as a piece of art, you're rescinding some of your control over it. You are saying this no longer simply belongs to me, but to everyone who now sees it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Did you guys, when you were making Dungeon World, would imagine that you would not control, would not have control of your product, because today we have just so much products based on Dungeon World, as you said.
Yeah,
like,
well, we did that on purpose.
Oh,
yeah, we did it on purpose, right?
Oh,
like,
that's beautiful.
Yeah, we licensed. The reason that there are a bunch of like high-minded intentionality reasons around licensing the game as Creative Commons. So for folks who don't know, Dungeon World's text is licensed under a very specific Creative Commons license that allows people to copy and paste and remix and build and publish and sell their own thing based on Dungeon World, so long as they credit Dungeon World as the originator of that thing. And we did that because, yes, it's cool to be able to give people a tool set and to honor Vincent's giving us Apocalypse World, and to honor the sort of general idea that we all kind of own a piece of this fantasy adventure thing in role-playing. But it was also because we just didn't want to have to bother worrying about licensing. Like, every time somebody emails me and says, hey, we want to translate Dungeon World into whatever language, what do we need to do? I'm like, nothing, just do it. Like, you can't have the art, and you can't have the layout, and you can't have the text. You can't have the fonts, but you can have the text. Everything about the text, go to town. Translate it, add your own stuff, put your own art in it. We don't have to deal with any of that. So it's a way for Sage and I to take a step back from having to deal with that hassle. And this way, we don't have to act as gatekeepers or overseers of every piece of content that's related to Dungeon World. If somebody makes something for Dungeon World that we don't believe in or are not interested in, or we think is like in poor taste, we're not responsible for it. Nobody can come to us and say like, how dare you allow this to exist? We can say, yes, this is terrible and shouldn't exist, but we never told anybody that they were allowed to make it, right? We put the tool set into the world, and certainly we can use our public space to decry something. If somebody made something really gross with Dungeon World, I would be happy to say like, don't buy this, it's garbage, but we're not responsible. We're not legally responsible for it. And I think that has created an environment in which so much unexpected cool stuff has emerged, right? The work of Lampblack and Brimstone, the work of Johnstone Metzger, all of the games that have been created inspired by or using pieces of Dungeon World have all been interesting and unpredictable in their own way. And we wouldn't have that if we had to license that product to somebody to allow them to make something creative. This way we don't have to worry about it. We just get to see it and engage with it.
And you get to see a lot of creative outcomes from that choice.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I saw a tweet from La Torre talking about a supplement, a Brazilian supplement from Julio Matos, and he just tweeted like, "I do not understand anything, but this is so cool." And all the Portuguese were like, "Yeah, retweet, awesome." And yeah, it's quite beautiful to see that your work can have branches all over the place. So, why do you design RPG? Why did you design Dungeon World, and why are you designing now Womb of Night? What does compel?
All the design that I do, whether it's full games or it is custom rules or just a little patch or a fix for a game that already exists, is to solve what I perceive to be a problem, either with my own campaign or with game design in general. And often that problem is this game does not exist, right? Like we made Dungeon World because we wanted a fantasy adventure game that wasn't Dungeons and Dragons, right? D&D was 4th edition was out. Sage was playing 3.5. I was playing AD&D, and we didn't want to play those games, but we still wanted our group to be elves and dwarves and wizards and going on fantasy adventures, and we wanted it to feel different than it felt. And we were also playing Apocalypse World, and we were like, this is great, and we like this. We're playtesting this game, it's really fun, and we want our dungeon game to feel more like this. And so we made Dungeon World to solve that problem, because there wasn't a game that like that in the world. We designed it ourselves. And with Womb of Night, I want there to be a game that is as weird as the strange parts of my brain will allow, and that game doesn't exist. I want it to, and there's a gap in the universe, and so I need to create it. And on the smaller scale, doing little designs here and there, creating custom stuff for Court of Swords or making the Far Verona faction turn, it's often filling a hole or adjusting something to make it work better as a show. And that, for me, is why design exists. Design exists to solve problems. And sometimes that problem is just a question that needs an answer, and you have to design for it.
Awesome, that's awesome. Yeah. Now, you probably know a lot of designers, and so this is a very innocent question. Can you answer which one is your favorite? Like, what is your favorite RPG designer, or maybe if it's even outside of the RPG spectrum?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people who I think do really good work, and there are a lot of people who have built structures for independent role-playing games to exist, right? Like, I think that a lot of the people that gave us our start, people like John Harper, people like Luke Crane, Steve Sigeti, and Jason Morningstar, I think that those people have, and obviously like Vincent, they've created a space for further design to flourish. And I think that there are so many people making use of that space, creating new things from that hard work that they did. And so I think it's really important to recognize kind of this new generation of people who are making these little specific, interesting games. I think if I wanted to just draw one up, the game I'm most interested in right now is a Forged in the Dark game called Mutants in the Night. By a designer named DC, and they are doing this really cool game about marginalization and being an outcast, and about community, and I would absolutely say that DC is someone to keep a very close eye on. They're doing some really interesting thing with design right now. And if you follow DC on Twitter, DC will point you at a ton of other really good designers
that's
out
awesome.
there as well. And I think what's really cool is that the space is spreading out. Like, when I got started designing games, I looked at the people who I admired, and it was very homogenous. It was a lot of like white dudes that lived in North America or maybe lived in Europe, and they existed as part of a important and influential group of people making games, but game design has branched out and really opened up for a lot more different kinds of people, which is really exciting. We're seeing people of color creating games and getting a platform for them, because it's not like people of color weren't making games before. It's just that now there's a space for them to do that. So like the designers of we were talking about before we went live, of Nahual, really cool, and they're telling stories about the places they're from and the cultures that they belong to, right? Like Nahual is a game that could not exist if its designers were not Latin American, if they were not Mexican, if they were not in that part of the world designing games about their experiences and about their culture. And I think that's really cool, like seeing more and more people tell stories that are from their own lived experience. And so I think that we're at the beginning of we're at the narrow end of a funnel, right? The next 5 or 10 years in design, we're going to see people from all over the world creating games that speak to experiences that are very different than we've ever seen before in games, which I think is super cool.
It's beautiful because it gives each product a very specific and tone and style as all these things start to happen. We here in Portugal still do not have our Portuguese role-playing game, but probably if someone starts to make it, it will be awesome and it will be unique.
Yeah, and I think that that's the thing, right? Is like recognizing that there are all of these really cool spaces to draw fantasy adventure from, for being able to tell these stories, and that you can make an RPG about just about anything. So if there is something in your personal culture, if there is something in the stories that you and your family have told each other for generations, then make a game about it, right? Like that's a really great way to express that, and we don't have to keep following necessarily in D&D's footsteps, right?
Yeah,
There's so much good stuff out there.
That is an awesome advice for all of you designers out there. Make the games based on your experiences. Come on, let's do this. And we here in Portugal, we have actually some really nice features, and somehow there isn't yet a role-playing game, but probably in the near future. Let's see. Adam, regarding our design process, we know that we can watch at this moment your game dev about Wombat Night, but talk with us a little bit about your design process.
So usually when I'm designing something, I have to recognize what it is that is like broken or doesn't work first, right? So it's easier when you're designing something for a game that already exists, right? If you're saying true. I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons and I don't like the experience system because it rewards players for things that I don't want as much in the game. I don't want as much focus on. I need to design something or steal something from another game and retool it to fix that problem, to solve that gap. So that's easy for a game that already exists. For a game that doesn't exist, recognizing the problem is, I want to play this. I have a desire to play a game, and none of the games that I own, none of the games that I am experienced with cover this. So research is the first thing, right? I'll go see, like, is there a game? And I get a lot of people who say this. They'll come to me and say, Adam, I worked for 3 years on this fantasy role-playing game, and then I found out someone had made a game just like it. And now I don't know what to do. I wasted all of this time designing this game, and someone else made this game, and now what do I do? And I have to tell them, like, this is why for me it's really important to learn as much as you can about as many games as there are in the world, because you might have someone else working on the same thing. Like, this is how Dungeon World got started, right? Sage and I both wanted the same thing, and we're designing our own separate games, and then we met at a convention, and I was like, oh, you're working on a D&D thing for Apocalypse World? So am I. Let's work together. And we made one game. And so, you don't want to sink 3 years into designing something and then have it publish it and spend a bunch of time and energy and have it already exist. So research, learning, figuring out like what is similar, and recognizing that it's not bad. If somebody already made a game that does the thing that you want to do, they've just saved you all the boredom and suffering that is designing a game. Game design sucks. It's not fun. It's mostly boring. And so, so that's nice, like learning that that's a thing. So if somebody else has already solved your problem, awesome, you're done, good. But if they haven't, if you're like, I want a game that is like an airbrushed painting of a wizard riding a pterodactyl, shooting a laser rifle at some barbarians, I want this game, but it does not exist. Cool. Well, I guess either I give up on that dream or I make the game myself. And then for me, like if anybody has watched that, like the game design stuff, it's pretty haphazard. Like I figure out what I need to get the game to a minimum playable state. Like what do I need to give somebody to be able to just pick this up and run it, right? How can I get to a playtest from here? Figure out the minimum things and then just start. Pick a thing and just start working on it. And I leave lots of blanks in my work. Like when I'm designing a playbook, I will, for example, like let's say we're making a game about space pirates, right? So you're like, okay, what do I need to make a game about space pirates? I need rules about what the characters are. I need rules about maybe spaceships, right? Building a spaceship or stealing a spaceship. I need rules about weapons and combat in outer space. And I will start designing. I'll say, okay, I need character types. So let's make a character. What do you need to be a character in this game? So what are my stats? Okay, what do these stats affect? And if I have a stat like dexterity affects maybe shooting a gun. Okay, so now I need rules for guns, right? So I'll make a note and say, okay, fill in these rules. And so what I'll do is I'll start. And for me, game design is like dropping ink onto a blank piece of paper. You will watch it spread out. It's not top to bottom. It's not filling out a spreadsheet. It's dropping little bits and pieces of design and watching them spread out and flow into each other. So it's very, very fluid and not at all straightforward for me. Which is why, like, if you look at Womb of Night now, there are a bunch of places on the character sheet that say, this is a move that will affect space combat. Whenever I get around to designing space combat, I will come back to this part and I will fix it. Once I know what space combat looks like, I can say how the pirate gets a bonus to do that, but I'm not designing space combat right now. I'm designing the pirate. And so you can leave questions on your sheet. You can say, I'll come back to swords or space combat or whatever, but for right now, let me get this minimum basic thing done. And then you play test it. You just get as many people to put their hands and their eyes on it. You get them to run through it, to look at it, to play it. And then you take that feedback and you shuffle it into the engine. And I think that the most important thing about designing and building stuff is that be willing to let go of something. There are way too many designers who, will say to me, I spent 5 years, 8 years, whatever, designing this game. I spent a bunch of money to print it. I have a booth at Gen Con. I had to take out another mortgage on my house, but nobody is buying my game. And I'm like, well, like, did you play test it? Like, who has seen your game? And they're like, well, I didn't want to give it away for free. I didn't want people to see it before they bought it. So, like, nobody has really seen it. And I'm like, well, nobody knows your game exists. Like, we just don't live in that world anymore. And I think that giving stuff away, giving your game away, saying like, this game is as done as I want it to be, and putting it in your folder of kind of mostly finished stuff you don't ever want to think about again. Someday, later on down the line, you will return to it, and you might see something in it you never saw before. And this is something that I learned really, really deeply from photography, right? There are photographers who... there's a famous street photographer named Gary Winograd, who, when he died, he had thousands and thousands of negatives that he had never printed, right? That he shot massive amounts of photos, right? And he would get them developed and he would just file them away. And he just never looked at them because maybe he just didn't have the time or the space to get away from that design. And I think that you can design something and you don't have to finish it. You can say, this is about as interested as I am in this. This is about as much as I care about it. I'm going to put it in this folder. And you know what? You might die before that ever gets finished. Someone might find it in your Google Drive 10 years after you're dead, and they might say, hey, this is an interesting design. I wonder why they never went back and finished this. But it doesn't mean it didn't mean anything to you, right? In that moment of taking the photograph, it was all that mattered to Gary Winograd, even if he never went back and looked at it. But there are lots and lots of photos that he went back and was like, I shot this 6 years ago, 10 years ago, 12 years ago. I hated it when I shot it, but now I see something. Right? Now I see something in the light. Now I see something in the way this person is in the shot. And now I'm in love with this thing, even if I didn't really care that much about it after it was shot. So I think you don't have to finish everything. You can just do a thing until you don't feel like doing it anymore, and then just let it go and give it away. Let somebody else build something with it, or come back to it in a year or 5 years or the next time you think of it. There's no reason for us to sink our entire lives into doing something just because we started it.
But it's hard to let go sometimes, and
I love it. I love letting go. I love saying, I say no to stuff halfway through all the time because
awesome.
I don't have the time or the energy to like keep doing something that I don't love, right?
Yeah.
Like if I really get stuck on a design, or I'm playing a game I don't like, or I'm just doing something and I'm like, this is not giving me the energy I need, it's just wasting my time, and I'll throw it away and I'll come back to it. Like I don't delete files. I don't delete photos, even if I think they're terrible, because you never know. In 20 years, I might come back and say, you know what? My aesthetic has changed. I see this differently. This game that I thought was terrible, maybe there's something in this that I can use.
Yeah, that's awesome. Your perception can change throughout the years, and then you come back, and this game actually does not suck, maybe.
Yeah, right? Or it sucks in a way you totally didn't anticipate.
Yeah.
And there are things in it, like you have changed. It's that whole aphorism about you can never step in the same stream twice, right? You as a person are constantly flowing and changing, and you will be different tomorrow. You're different now than when we started this conversation. And what you like and what you care about and the way that you see game design is going to change every single day in a little bit, or sometimes in a big way, right? You're going to run into a game that will totally change your mind about how things work. And so you can come back and you can look at something that you thought was terrible and be like, wait a second, there's something in here that I didn't see at the time. Or you can look at something that you thought was great, but gave it some time and be like, you know what, it's not as good as I thought. It could use some work. I also think that it's positive to release things before they're perfect, because nothing ever is. And if you absolutely demand something to be finished and done, you'll be that guy 20 years in who's still working on their like D&D style RPG that's going to solve all of RPG's problems forever because you can never let it go, right? Like Dungeon World is not perfect by any means, but no game is. And the games that I love most, right? Burning Wheel, Apocalypse World, Fiasco, Microscope, like all of those games have stuff about them that just flat out sucks. But that's fine, because nothing is perfect. No human endeavor is perfect, and if you aim for perfect, you'll never get anything done, and that's a bigger waste.
So finishing a game is about letting it go.
Yeah, I absolutely think so. Like, you want it to be good, you want to be proud of it, but if you just keep fiddling with it and you keep trying to make it perfect, it'll never get done. I think you have to get to a point where you're like, I am proud of this as it stands, and I can't see any big glaring things that are going to embarrass me if I let it go. Here it is. And then that's why we have like multiple editions of stuff, because sometimes you have a revelation 5 years or 10 years down the line and you're like, oh, you know what? I can change this. I can do something different. And it doesn't invalidate the original game, right? Like if you look at, I think that Dungeons and Dragons is a great example. You can have people who love first edition. You can have people who love third edition, fourth edition, fifth edition. And you can have people that love all of them, and they're all independently interesting designs, right? Yeah. You don't have to burn the past for the present to exist.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true. And then once you let your game go, and people start to downloading or buy your game, it's really hard. Like you design, you had all this process, and how do you take into consideration how people might use and play your games? Like, how do you make sure that they are playing the game as intended? It's really hard to for us here, Portuguese community. We are starting to make our games, and we have a lot of conversation with each other, and we don't know the answer. Like, how do we get to know that people will play the game as it is intended to play?
Well, that's what the rules of the game are for, right? Yeah. Like any place where if the game needs to function a certain way to be a success, you have to write a rule for it. Okay. And that rule doesn't have to be necessarily like roll this die and this will happen. It can be just a line in the game, right? If you look at the GMing rules in Dungeon World and Apocalypse World, those are rules, right? They tell the players, this is how you perform this act in the game. This is how you take on the role of the game master and how you succeed at that role, right? If you do things a different way, you are not playing the game the way I designed it, right? The way Vincent designed it. Those are rules for the game.
Yeah.
So if you want someone to do something, you have to tell them in the book, do this thing, right? Because people will always, you have to kind of give this up as a role-playing game designer, because there's no wrong way to look at a painting, right? There's no wrong way necessarily to watch a movie, right? It's a very simple, unidirectional behavior. You walk into the theater, you sit down, you watch the movie. Maybe you are paying a special attention, maybe you're not, but it's pretty easy to watch a movie right. It's very difficult to play a role-playing game correctly unless the rules are very specific. And even then, people will deviate. People will say, I'm going to do it a different way because I know better than you. They're wrong. They don't, but they know their table better, and they know what they think they know, and there's going to be a degree of variance. And the way to fix that is playtesting, right? Playtest, right? Get feedback from as many people as possible, put the game out into the world, and listen when people say, I didn't like this rule, so I just did something different. Or like, I think this rule is bad. You don't have to agree with them. Maybe they're wrong, but you can see patterns, right? If people behave a certain way repeatedly, you know that you need to change the rules of the game to re-encourage them to do that. And that's really all game design is, right? It's getting people to behave a certain way.
Yeah.
It's just about writing the game in that way and then testing it to make sure it works.
I think there's a sentence, I don't know who said it, like game design is like mind control.
Yeah.
I don't know who said that.
It's Luke and Jared.
Okay,
yeah,
awesome.
Luke and Jared. They used to do a panel, a presentation called "Game Design as Mind Control," and yeah, I think it's a great thesis, and it absolutely, it's absolutely true, for sure.
That's awesome. Now we have a game, and to play the game, we need people. On a broader note, do you think that RPG is like a good tool to break the ice and strengthen bonds of a group of people, even if they just met now or are a group of friends that are playing RPG for the first time? How do you feel about that?
Absolutely. Well, the thing that makes people often uncomfortable about being around strangers is that you don't know them very well yet. You don't know the way they communicate. Maybe they talk very fast. Maybe they talk slow. Maybe they need time or space to get involved in a conversation. And you have to feel out the rules of that conversation with those people. But a role-playing game gives you an opportunity to be social with people, with strangers, with a clearly defined understanding of whose turn it is to talk and what they can say and what they can't say. It gives you structure, and I think that creates a venue in which people can get to know each other comfortably. At least that's been my experience with it, where if it were just randomly meeting at a party or whatever and trying to have a conversation, you can usually kind of like fake your way through it eventually, but it can be uncomfortable. With a role-playing game, you can say, all right, I'm the dungeon master and you are the players, and we all know each other's jobs. We're familiar with this kind of social interaction. And it gives you a topic. There's something to talk about. There's something to engage with, to say, okay, we're going to go on an adventure together. We're going to talk about the rules. We're going to play the game. And I think that's really powerful. And it absolutely acts as a sort of social lubricant between that awkwardness and makes it easier to have those conversations and to engage.
It makes sense. We have here João Mariano, a guy from the community who funded the very biggest group in Portugal of role players, of course, and he often says that. I'll try not to mess up. Friends cannot turn out to be good role players, but good role players always turn as good friends. Like this is his motto.
I mean, I think there's certainly opportunity. Like I've played role playing games with people that I haven't ended up being friends with, but I also think that role playing games can give you an opportunity to learn things about people and to kind of see what they're like. It's a way to engage with a bit of a safety net, right? And I've always found it to be very useful.
Awesome. So for a group of both players and an experienced GM, so both inexperienced players and GM, which game do you think would suit better to strengthen their bonds?
You know, that's a great question, because I think that it really depends. Like, I think that every group is they're gonna key into stuff differently.
Okay, every table has a table, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that any game that supports the player's creative agenda, right? Some players prefer having a game master, in which case they should play a game where that role exists. Some groups prefer a more collaborative effort, in which case they should play a game that leans more towards like Microscope or Quiet Year. Everybody is going to have their own stuff. Some people want to play serious games. Some people want to play silly games. And I think that the way that you can get to that place isn't that there's any one game that will work for everybody, but I think that you can start that conversation before you play the game by saying, what are we interested in, right? What kinds of games does this group like? What do we feel passionate about? What movies have we been watching that we feel inspired by? What TV shows, right? Is everybody thinking about superheroes because we all went and watched a Marvel movie? Or are we thinking about doing something dark and gritty instead? Like, where is our creative agenda live? And having that conversation, whether it's a full, like, long conversation, whether you're doing like a proper session 0, or whether it's just hanging out for a few minutes before the game as you pick from your options. I think just sitting down with players and doing that first, I think is a really good way to make sure you're picking the right game, and knowing what questions to ask, right? Knowing how to get that conversation going, I think is a really good skill, because you can't just say, who wants to play a game? Do you want to play role-playing? Do you want to play D&D? Should we... does anyone want to play Shadowrun? Like, being able to say, okay, it's not just about picking the game, it's about why you want to play D&D or why you want to play Shadowrun, right? So I think that's really important and very cool.
Yeah. So regarding a table, how important do you think that player chemistry is at the table? But more importantly, is as a designer, when you are in your design process, do you think that the game design should help with that somehow, or are both or it's separate things?
I think that the player chemistry is important. I think it's definitely important, especially with campaigns. But I think that sometimes you end up playing games, especially at conventions, with people you don't know and who you can't develop chemistry with. And in that case, I think that skill at playing role-playing games, like, I think you can be a good player. I think that's maybe more important. I think that you can learn things and you can interact through the game, even if you don't necessarily know the person very well or don't have any chemistry with the person. You can be a good player. And I think that in that way, games can definitely support that. And I think that some games do a better job than others. But I don't think that necessarily creating chemistry between the players is the game's responsibility, but I think giving the players tools to create a cogent and interesting narrative is the responsibility. It's just a question of the players being proficient with that tool, right? Like, you could imagine this: you can take a group of people who want to build a house, and none of them have ever built a house with each other before. One of them is really good with a hammer, one of them is really good with a saw, another one is good at painting, someone else is an electrician, and all together, even if they've never worked together, they can build a house because they're all individually good at building houses in their own way, right? And in that, you're performing specific behaviors towards a group goal. And I think role-playing games are the same way. You don't have to know the people, but I think that you can also get more comfortable with a group, so that if you are building that, if you're the paintbrush wielder, you can get comfortable with the same hammer user and the same electrician and the same, carpenter. And so everybody is now working together on their third or fourth or sixth house, and it's going to be better because you have that practice. But I think that the core principles of playing a role-playing game, you can learn them on your own. And then that will make you a better player, no matter who you're playing with.
Oh, beautiful. So, and when things go wrong, that sometimes it happens, feelings can be hurt during play or during a campaign. Do you have any advice when tension sets in a group, how to deal with that? Because sometimes it can be hard to deal with that type of feelings.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the time the social stuff gets put on the shoulders of the game master, which is not
to.
at all reasonable. Like it's not the GM's job to make sure everybody has fun or like gets along. It's everybody's job. And I think that we forget that we can stop playing and just sit down and say, hey, we're people trying to play a game together. Let's take a minute and figure out why there is this like thing going on. And sometimes that means taking a break. Sometimes it means like, okay, let's just stop. We're not playing today anymore. We're done. We're going to figure out like why this is a problem. Sometimes it means taking a break from the group and saying, all right, next week we're going to do this, or we're going to talk about it in our Facebook thread or whatever, however you communicate. It doesn't have to happen right away, but I think that it's important to not try to resolve that like in the game, in the moment. Sometimes it's as easy as just checking in and stopping. And there's lots of tools for doing that, for preventing this kind of stuff. But also I think that we forget sometimes that the other people we're playing with are people first and then players second.
Yeah, indeed. And regarding feelings, I think you have a quite beautiful show, Hot for Teacher, right? Can you talk us about a little bit about that? Because I think there are some Portuguese that don't know about that, and I really want to get them know now. Yeah.
So Hot for Teacher is a spin-off show of Office Hours. So Office Hours is the call-in GM advice show that I do, where people submit questions about game mastering or game design, and I answer them 3 at a time on a semi-weekly show. And a lot of the questions that I was answering were questions about relationships between players, between the GM and their players, between two players. And someone mentioned in chat once, they were like, you should just do a show about relationships, because a lot of these questions are relationship advice questions. And so then we started doing Hot for Teacher, and basically I just answer relationship questions. And a lot of the time I will answer them in the framework of role-playing games, so people have something to kind of help them understand that. And it's been really fun. It's been a cool project, and we've been doing it for a while now. And it's always interesting to get to do an episode and talk about those things.
How do you feel when people share with you sometimes some intimate things? And how do you deal with that? Is it not weird? Or I imagine in the first couple of episodes it were.
It's I wouldn't say that it's weird necessarily. Like I don't feel. I feel like it's a lot, right? It's a lot of responsibility. I wouldn't have started the show if I wasn't sure that I was capable of taking on that responsibility. But it is a lot. It's a lot like when people share that stuff with you, being able to handle it gently and to sort of do it justice. It's certainly like a lot of work, but I think it's worthwhile. And there's a reason why we don't do it that often, is because I don't think if I did it, try to do it every week, I don't think I'd run out of energy. So again, it's that knowing where my boundaries are, and then kind of giving myself space to do it well. I'd rather do half as many episodes twice as well than doing twice as many episodes half as well.
That's beautiful to know. Really, that's awesome. So reversing to happier moments. What is your most memorable tabletop RPG gaming experience in a group? Do you have like a one? Because you have a lot.
I play so many RPGs. Like I think every campaign has something. Every campaign has some big moment or multiple big moments that I am just like in love with. There is drama and comedy and seriousness and silliness in every game that I play. So yeah, there's too many things to pick any one or even a dozen things. But I think that's the joy of it, right? Is like looking back at a game and seeing all of those things and recognizing that even the stuff that's little, right? It's not always the big intense moments. Sometimes it's just like a little thing that someone said, or a member of chat like really understanding a theme in the game. I think for me a lot of what's valuable is watching people kind of look at the content that I'm creating, look at the campaigns that I'm building, seeing these things and noticing the subtext, noticing the little bits and pieces.
I see.
That's really meaningful for me when someone is like, oh, wait a second, like this character is connected to this other character or this other thing from 40 episodes ago, and feeling like someone is really paying attention to the work that I do. Yeah, that's really, really rewarding for me. It's less just like things happening sort of on stage, and more for me, the reward comes from the audience, like really noticing and paying close attention to the things that I'm doing. Yeah,
Awesome.
That's the stuff I find really rewarding.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like for me, it's still that moment when people play role-playing game for the first time, and they discover this whole new world of possibilities, and not entirely you can do whatever you want, because there's context and there's a lot of boundaries in the character. But yeah, that moment when people destroyed that preconceived nerdy concept of what RPG is, and they say like, whoa, this is cool. That moment for me, it's like, okay, I got them. It's very enjoyable.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will lean into moments of like deep character immersion, which I think like has value certainly, but it's not for me the be all and end all. Like I would rather the players recognize the kind of larger overarching stuff in a game than to have them feel like I'm really in character. Like that's cool, but I think that's a player joy. As a GM, it's the like holistic approach. It's having the audience and the players all feel like they get the world that we've built together.
Yeah, and all
they understand the themes
and all the subplots you develop. That is always awesome when you have, and in your case you have an audience. So when you have an audience that can perceive that subtext and subplot, obviously it's memorable. So regarding as playing as a GM, is Burning Wheel your favorite game, or do you have like another game where you prefer to play as a GM?
I mean, I love running. I love running Burning Wheel because I think that it feels very collaborative, in the sense that my favorite style of GMing is for the players to tell me what they care about and what they want, and then I build towards that. And Burning Wheel does that, right? Burning Wheel is a game about the characters, so I think that it's absolutely my favorite in that regard, and that it plays to my skills.
Is it easy? For you?
Like this is the thing for me. Burning Wheel is super easy because all it asks of the game master is to be adversarial. And I don't mean this in the sense of like being a jerk, right? It's not like take away the things the players love and like punish them and harass them. It's not adversarial in the AD&D sense of the word. It's adversarial in the sense of like you take what they want and you make them work for it. You take the things that they think are true and you put a twist on them. You create a world in which their lives are complicated by their desires, and then you let them drive towards their passions. And that for me is how I run most games. Like I care very, very deeply about the players' desires as players and how they express those through their characters. And I think that Burning Wheel gives me all the tools to do that. But it also, I think, only really works if you play a long-term campaign. Like you really have to dig into it. I think for shorter-term games, you can get some similar stuff out of playing Burning Wheel or of playing Dungeon World instead of Burning Wheel. Where with Dungeon World, the reason that I like running it for short games is that it's very, very good at taking what the players want to put in the world and rolling with it. If you watch like the Waypoint Dungeon World stream that I did, or the Gen Con, the 3 2-hour shots that we did, in those games, I come to the table with nothing planned because I want to ask the players, what do you care about? What kinds of things do you want in this game? And I think that I've had the practice to run it enough that I can roll with basically anything the players say. And that's really fun for me, especially with new players, to be able to say, yeah, like whatever you think is cool and fun, I'm not here to tell you no. I'm not here to tell you, like, sorry, there's no elves in this world. I may have a creative agenda in another game. I may have like some deep things that I want to put in the game, but I find coming to the table with Dungeon World as a blank slate is way more fun if the game is short term. So it's just like having a toolbox with the right tools in it for whatever kind of thing that you need. It's better than having one game and saying, I will try to do everything with Dungeons and Dragons. you want to come to the table with a toolbox of a whole bunch of different stuff. So that when the players say, we want a game that does these things, you can say, I've got a game for you. Here's the right game, right? So for me, those games tend to be Dungeon World or Burning Wheel.
Oh, so I was blown away when you at Gen Con tear apart a character sheet and and then just made up a whole new character. Okay, here are the bard moves with I don't remember which playbook was, but you get the point.
Yeah,
it was crazy.
somebody wanted to play a barbarian, but they were like, but I want to be a bard, but I want this barbarian thing, and I was just like, fine, here, take half of this character sheet. Yeah, or a druid and a bard, and I was just like, here, just go, just do the thing. I don't care. I designed the game. I'm allowed. But you are too. Like, and that's the thing. Like, mastery of a game allows you to take risks and to make changes to that game. A lot of people will come to a game, like they'll play one game. They'll play Dungeons and Dragons for 10 years, and they're like, I'm a great dungeon master. I can play anything. And then you'll put in front of them a sci-fi game or something, and they'll say, well, I've played Dungeons and Dragons, so I don't need to learn how to do the GM stuff in this game. I'm a great Dungeons and Dragons GM. But like, you need to be the master of your tools, right? Just because I know how to take a photograph doesn't mean that I'm going to be an excellent cinematographer. Like, yeah, they're similar, but I don't know how to work a video camera the same way that I do a still photo camera, right? So you want to be able to recognize where your skills are and to be good at the things you're good at. And then you can start to figure out how those things overlap.
I was just blown away when you did that. It was a really nice improvisational move. Improvised move,
and the only reason I could do that is because I know what parts of the character can be separated from what other parts. Like, I understand the modularity of the system, and if I didn't know that, then I'd feel restricted and say, like, you know, like I couldn't do that with 5th edition D&D. Like, I know D&D really well, but not at a design level like that. So.
Yeah. Now, what game is the hardest for you to play?
What? I mean, there's a lot of really bad role-playing games in the world, and I have been cajoled and coerced and tricked into playing many of them. So that's hard sometimes. You know, when you sit down to play a game and you're just like, this game sucks, and I'm not having fun with it, but I like for whatever reason have to keep playing it, and like finding a way out of that hole can be very challenging. You know, so I don't like playing bad games. And I definitely believe that there are badly designed games. I definitely think that there's a complete lie that all games are good in their own way. I think that's BS. I think that I could happily name like a dozen terrible role-playing games, but I think that you can also make something fun out of a bad game. People have been playing shitty games forever and having fun with them. Like,
that's true.
If we demanded really, really good games from the get-go, role-playing games would never exist, because 1st edition Dungeons and Dragons sucks. It sucks. It's not a good game. There are massive design holes all over it. There's balance issues. No, the original D&D is bad. It is a badly designed game. And then AD&D sucks too. But also 3rd edition, 4th edition, and 5th edition also suck in their own way. Dungeon World sucks. Like I was saying before, like you cannot have a perfect game. You can't have a perfect game. So you need to recognize the ways in which the game you are playing sucks and decide if that is terminal suckiness or not. And if it's not, you have to design the things that are bad about it. You fix them or you cut them out, right? Like, this is why I think that all players of role-playing games, given enough time, are designers, because you eventually just have to fix the things about the game that don't work for your group. And then when you do, you have a new game that you co-created with your group. And that's really cool and powerful. It's just work. And that's the thing, like going in and expecting that, you know, you're going to hate a game because it's bad isn't true. I played 1st edition Shadowrun for a long time on stream, and it went all kinds of sideways, and it was really fun. But it was bad. Shadowrun 1st edition is not good. It's not well designed. It's clunky and bad, but you can have fun with bad games. We've been doing it forever. It's fine. Yeah,
so the point is, designers out there, your game sucks, but you can have fun with it.
Well, and that's the thing is like, just because a game sucks doesn't mean you can't like make a ton of money selling it. It doesn't mean that it's not going to win a bunch of awards. It doesn't mean that like people won't love it. People have to be able to love things that aren't perfect, because if we're only allowed to love things that aren't perfect, our lives are devoid of joy because nothing is perfect, right? And this is this weird thing that is happening, and I think has been true forever, but feels very true now, where we think that loving something has to be unconditional. We think that if you criticize something, you must hate it, which is fundamentally incorrect. I get this a lot where people are like, why do you criticize D&D so much? You must hate it. Adam must hate Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm like, no, like if you love something, you understand it. You feel it and you know what is true about it. And that means embracing the things about it that are crap, right? In the same way that you may love your significant other, you may love a sibling, you may love your parents, but like they're not perfect. They do things that annoy you. There are things about them that are wrong and bad, and the things that's true about games too. We should be able to recognize like this game sucks, but it's still I'm enjoying it. I'm having fun playing this terrible game. But that's very hard for me. To go back to that question we originally talked about, like I find bad games hard to play because they put so much more work on me to either fix or bypass them. A good game like Apocalypse World or Burning Wheel is easier to play. It is smooth and it flows in a way that works for me. And when I play a game like First Edition Shadowrun or like Vampire or God help me Rifts, I feel like I'm walking naked down a hallway made out of sandpaper. Like I can feel every awful scrape that the mechanics have to deliver. Whereas it doesn't feel like that. But that's just me, right? Everybody is going to feel differently about different games, and we're willing to do more or less work depending on the game based on how much we already love it, right?
That's beautiful, Adam, because I know a guy that loves Rifts, and you just said
it's you know, this is the thing, is you are allowed to love things that are bad.
Indeed.
And Rift's setting is all kinds of weird and interesting, but its mechanisms trying to play that game is like being punched in the face. I just don't want it. I'm not interested in getting punched in the face. But some people have more tolerance for getting punched in the face than I do. So that's fine. That's okay if they want to play that game. Yeah. And I think that's the thing, is like we don't all have to agree on like what games work for us. I think there is some value in recognizing design that is good and works well. I think it's okay to say that games are bad, but I don't think it's okay to say games are bad and if you like them, you are bad. I think instead we want to say there are games that are bad, but you can still have fun playing a trash game, because we all do. We all do all the time. It's constant.
Awesome. So Adam, regarding bad and good games, which Powered by the Apocalypse game do you think it's like the best? We can have like Dungeon World outside of this selection, okay, for personal reasons. So
sure. I was gonna say Dungeon World is both. It's both games. It's the worst and the best.
Oh, okay.
No, so I think
do you have one?
The absolute yes, I can tell you my favorite. Because I think that like obviously the best Powered by the Apocalypse game is Apocalypse World.
Yeah, of course.
Right, like it's the game that system was designed for. There are things that you cannot decouple from Apocalypse World and the system. I think that recognizing what Apocalypse World does and changing things about it in an intelligent way is how you get a good version of that game. And I think that the best Apocalypse World based game is still Sagas of the Icelanders. I think Sagas of the Icelanders understands something about the design of Apocalypse World that no other game, Dungeon World included, no other game was able to capture. I think that Gregor Vuga understands the ideas of certainty and uncertainty. He understands how moves work in a way that is beautiful. It's brilliant, and it says something to the core design of Apocalypse World that no other game built on that system since it came out in the last, 10 years almost, none of them have captured it in the same way. Whether you like sagas or not is up to you, right? It has one thing to say, it has one thing to explore, and it does that thing. And I think that it understands the mechanisms of the Apocalypse engine in a way that no other game has done. And I think that that's very powerful.
Yeah, that's awesome. I still did not play it, but I've read it, and because doing a hack of a game, yeah, you need to understand the core concepts and something about it. That there are a lot today. There are a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse games, but even that term nowadays is so much because there are so many different games that are powered by the apocalypse, but they work differently.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. It's weird, but it's nice.
Yeah, I think that the games that kind of on the other end of the spectrum, the games that struggle with that engine are the games that don't understand what Apocalypse World fundamentally as a system for play understands. I think that there are games that exist out there that didn't quite get it, that just built on top of what Vincent had without really fundamentally understanding it. And I think you can tell. I think that if you look at a bunch of Apocalypse World games side by side, you can tell the ones that understand it and the ones that are able to deconstruct it into something new. And I think that's fairly clear. But the games that take it and get it and understand it, I think that none does so well as Sagas.
Awesome. Adam, people are asking, what do you think about Zweihander and Call of Cthulhu?
So Zweihander is interesting because I think that it's an homage to.
It won the prize, Danny, right?
Yeah. It's an homage to Warhammer and to Warhammer 2nd Edition particularly, and I think that's really cool about it. I think the art is great. I've talked about it a bunch. I've done a couple of videos about it, and I think it's a very cool game. I haven't had a chance to play it yet because obviously I'm very busy, but I am really interested in seeing where it goes. I think Zweihander is probably the least interesting thing that Daniel Fox and Grim and Perilous is going to do. They're releasing a colonial horror game, and they're doing Tetsubo, which is a gritty samurai game, and I think those are going to be a lot more interesting than Zweihander. But I think Zweihander is a great start because it taps into. You can tell that Daniel is in marketing because I think that it's a great way to get seed money to start this business for making other games because there's a big audience for kind of this callback to and an iteration of the original sort of Warhammer stuff. Yeah, I think it's a great shot. And as for Call of Cthulhu, I think it's a terrible game. I think it's awful. And I don't think it's awful on purpose. I think that it just like so many games of its era, I think that it tries to promise you something, and then it gives you mechanics that cannot fulfill that promise. There is nothing cosmologically horrific about the mechanisms of Call of Cthulhu. Nothing about it feels Lovecraftian at all. It's a simple conflict mechanism with like a badly thought out insanity rule tacked onto it. It doesn't feel at all like I'm playing a Lovecraft story when I play Call of Cthulhu. I think it's a classic example right up there with Vampire for games that try to be one thing and whose mechanics completely fall flat.
For our fortune, we have Undying to play Vampire, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think Vampire is very important to role-playing games culturally. Yeah. Like that's culturally true. and historically, I think it's super important that it exists.
Yeah.
But it's a gritty superhero game, not a game of personal storytelling and angst. I think that it's. Yeah, I think that it a lot of it says one thing and does another, but I think that it's still super important that it was made because I think it shifted the culture of role playing in a way that another game couldn't necessarily have done.
I totally get you. It's nice to see that when you look at the product, at the role playing game. You tend to look at its design and you try to understand its design. So that's why you say, like, a lot of people don't say Call of Cthulhu, it's bad because, but you say it because you look into its design and the mechanics and what they mean and what they do.
the Call of Cthulhu conversation always goes the same way. Somebody says to me, what do you think of Call of Cthulhu? I say it's bad. They say, well, I had fun playing it with my group. And I say, cool, congratulations.
Awesome, yeah.
End of conversation, right? The thing is, I don't give games credit for things that groups do well. Like, if a group has a really great time playing a terrible game because they all put in a ton of effort. Like, you can make Call of Cthulhu like scary, intense, and whatever, but all of that work has to come from the players and the GM, right? The game gives you nothing.
Yeah.
And I don't think that Call of Cthulhu deserves any credit. I hate when people are like, I had a really great time playing Call of Cthulhu because my group is amazing, because my GM is amazing, and we all really love Lovecraft, and we love telling horror stories. We had this really great time. You should play Call of Cthulhu. And I'm like, no. You should play with that group, but Call of Cthulhu brought nothing to the table. You should take credit for that.
What about the game?
And I think, I think that there are better games, like Cthulhu Dark does a better job of that. I think that good games use their mechanisms to encourage and inspire, and Call of Cthulhu only tells you whether or not you are able to climb a ladder. Like, it resolves tasks, and that's it. And I could flip a coin, right? I don't need that.
That's awesome. Yeah, like if we take the example of Dread and Bruno Darko, just type that. Yeah, Dread. It has a mechanic design.
Yes, yeah, it's a good game.
Yeah,
Call of Cthulhu is not. Like, that's the whole conversation. Is that the reason that Dread is better for telling horror stories is because it's a good game and it was made for that.
Indeed.
But Call of Cthulhu isn't. It just isn't.
Yeah, I love to talk about Dread because the way that they made the game, and like you are playing Jenga, but the tension is physical because your body reacts when you are trying to take a piece of the tower and it starts to wobble. Yeah, it's not only fiction. Your body, as a player, is reacting to the tension that the scene is creating. Oh, it's just beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, again, like, Dread is a good game, and Call of Cthulhu it isn't, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Like,
and that's fine. Awesome. So, Adam, what's next for Adam Koebel?
Keeping on, man. I got four shows. You know, I figure Court of Swords at episode 100. They're all around level 11 or 12. And we've got another, 9 or 10 levels to go. So probably another 100 episodes of that. Far Verona continues. I want to get Womb of Night closer and closer to publishing. We've got two new D&D shows on D&D's channel. There's all kinds of good stuff going on, and it's less about what's next and more about, like, I'm in it. I'm in the middle of so many good things. So it's just a matter of keeping those going.
Awesome. So when do you will have your 5th show, Adam?
Never. So I say no, right? Yeah. I hit my limit. I do 4 a week with the occasional, like, one shot or whatever, but 4 a week is exactly how many games I can run without burning out. And I figured that out early on, and that's it. I just refuse. I can't. Like, I have tons of games that I would love to play. I'd love to start a Burning Wheel game. I'd love to play another game of Blades. I would love to play. There's this new Android Universe Genesis game that I would love to try, but I'm not going to, because I know where my limits are. And so I'm going to keep that bracket, and I'm going to set aside those ideas. I'm going to write them down and put them in my folder. And when another show is done, I've got 16 ideas that I can be like, here's the thing, let's grab one of these.
Awesome. So do you think in the near future or in the far future, are you thinking of making a 2nd edition of Dungeon World? I know that you get this question a lot.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I think with Dungeon World, again, we designed to solve problems, and I don't think that there's anything. I don't think there's anything that's so broken about Dungeon World that it needs a new edition. Like, yes, it would. We could sell a ton of copies, and we could make a bunch of money, and that could be a thing. But I don't want to do that just because people want me to, and I don't want to do it just because, like, it's a lot of work. But I just don't feel inspired to make another Dungeon World. I love the way that it is. I think there's so much good fan content out there. And right now, I just don't think Sage and I feel the need. There may be a day where we look back at it and we're like, yeah, we could do better. And I know that Sage and I both have stuff about Dungeon World that we might do differently or might write differently now, certainly, because nothing is perfect, right? But right now, my passion is elsewhere. My passion is actual play. My passion is getting Womb finished. And maybe someday there'll be a moment where I look back at Dungeon World and I'm like, yeah, cool, I could make another version of that. But yeah, not today.
After Womb, I want to play Womb of Night. So
yeah, right, exactly. There's only so much time and energy, and Sage has 2 kids, and I've got the internet as my baby, so I got a lot to do. So.
Awesome, Adam. So tell our beautiful audience, and thank you guys for being there, watching us, and typing awesome questions for both us. So Adam, where can we find you?
The easiest place to find me is going to probably be on Twitch at twitch.tv/Adam Koebel, or on Twitter. I'm Skinny Ghost over on Twitter. Those are the 2 places that are my kind of main thing. But you can also find me occasionally on twitch.tv/D&D. You can find me on twitch.tv/Roll20app or RollPlay with ItMeJP. And then obviously YouTube for all of the stuff that I do in various places, but Twitter is the main jam. And if you're interested in learning more about the game that I made, Dungeon World, you can go to dungeon.world, and you can buy the PDF or the book right through that site.
Awesome. You guys also can check Adam's website, where you have all the links, also social media, and dungeonworld.com, where you can get the very best, or at least my favorite medieval fantasy role-playing game. You guys already know this, so I will not repeat it. So thank you guys for being there. We'll now record the after talk. If you want to get access to that, you know what you can do. Get to our Patreon. Let's make more attacks and kill monsters. Thank you so much, Adam, for being here. I will be totally honest, this was like a dream come true for both me, for both Roll Initiativa, and for both the Portuguese community. It was crazy to have you here. Thank you so much. So, bye guys.
Bye everybody.
Whee! So this was one more episode, the very second episode in English of Rola Diplomacia, which stands for Roll for Diplomacy. Today we had the honorable and beautiful guest Adam Koebel, where we talked about RPG design and communities. Stay tuned in the very next Sunday for more RPG conversation.